Welcome back to another episode of Al-Sharq Al-Awsat Lana, Our Middle East, where we look at the Middle East from the inside out. And here we have a region undergoing a tectonic shift, a critical moment in the history of the ancient and modern Middle East. And today, I'm always delighted to welcome my partner, JCFA senior scholar on Palestinian affairs and Arab affairs, Khaled Abu Toameh. Khaled, it's always a pleasure to be in conversation with you, to understand more deeply what we are facing as a Middle East region. Of course, Israel here as an indigenous member of the Arab Muslim majority Middle East. Today, we're talking about a very sensitive topic, and that is the Palestinian Authority teetering on the verge of collapse. And we've got to really reveal and unmask what's going on. Actually, as we speak, the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization Central Council, is meeting at the behest of its chairman, Mahmoud Abbas, otherwise known as Abu Mazen, to elect the first time ever a vice president of the Palestinian Authority. Now, a lot of this has to be unpacked. There's no one better in the Middle East to do it than you, because there is a lot more here than meets the eye. Appearance versus reality, and a stark warning to the West to, as they say in Latin, caveat emptor, may the buyer beware. And we say that, Khaled, because we're at this really watershed moment in the Middle East where the Palestinian leadership can either become part of the greater, more stabilizing, securitizing Middle East, or they can remain a subversive element, a subversive actor, not only to Israel, but to the Arab Sunni establishment itself.
Well, then I find that people around the world are more excited about this move to appoint a vice president for the Palestinian president than Palestinians themselves. You hardly hear anything from the Palestinians. No one seems to take this whole thing seriously, and I will later explain why. What we are talking about here, as you mentioned before, is a two-day meeting of a body called the Palestine the PLO Central Council. This is another key decision-making body that if you ask many Palestinians, they wouldn't even know. What does this body do? What are its authorities? What are its powers? But we're talking about something like, 50, 60, 70 PLO officials who are supposed to meet over the next 2 days to discuss President Mahmoud Abbas's idea of appointing a deputy or a vice president. Now, the question here is, Dan, vice president of what? People are mistakenly saying that Mahmoud Abbas is about to appoint a vice president for the Palestinian Authority, while Mahmoud Abbas and other Palestinian officials in Ramallah that I have been talking to, they are saying that he is simply talking about appointing a deputy to the chairman of the PLO, who happens to be Mahmoud Abbas. Now, why is Mahmoud Abbas playing this game? What is going on? Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, is under a lot of pressure from the US, from Europeans, and from some Arab countries, specifically the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and other countries, to reform the Palestinian Authority, to share powers with another leader, and to prepare for a successor. We're talking about a man who's 89 years old right now, but he seems to be in good health, by the way. So Mahmoud Abbas recently promised the Egyptians and the United Arab Emirates and Americans that, yes, okay, I'm going to share powers. I will appoint a deputy. Now, their understanding was that he will appoint a vice president, a potential successor for the head of the Palestinian Authority. But when Mahmoud Abbas came back to Ramallah, he made it very clear that he is talking about appointing a deputy for the chairmanship of the PLO.
Which really means nothing, because the PLO today is an empty suit.
That's number one. Yeah.
Or an empty galabia.
Yeah, the main player is the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
The PLO is just a name. It has no real influence over the Palestinians. It's just, a body that continues to pay salaries to veteran leaders and other people, but it doesn't really play any role in managing the day-to-day affairs of the Palestinians. So there's another point here, Dan, that people haven't noticed. If you're going to appoint a vice president for the PLO, then he has to be a member of the PLO Executive Committee, which is the PLO's government, which means that the number of potential successors is very limited, because the number of the PLO Executive Committee members is very small. It's less than 18 people, which leaves us with 2 or 3 potential successors. One of them is Hussein al-Sheikh. In recent days, I've been hearing the name of
Majid Faraj.
No, he's not a member of the PLO Executive Committee, but we've been hearing the names of Ahmad Azzam al-Ahmad, another veteran PLO official, which at the end of the day, Dan, what are we talking about? We are talking about PLO leaders meeting in Ramallah to promote or to elevate the status of one of them, of one of Abbas's cronies. We're not talking about paving the way for the emergence of new leadership, younger leadership. This is not real reform. Even if Abbas does appoint a president for the Palestinian Authority, we're back to square one, because this deputy president will be one of his cronies. So what have you achieved? What kind of reform is this?
Well, what this is a deception move that is basically has been structured since 1993 around an American and Israeli idea. It's a Western package that is really a reflection of a mask that has really been that has covered what's really going on the Palestinian side, which is really, strategically speaking, the PLO, Fatah, and the PA are all partners in their strategic objective, together with the Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It's ultimately the same goal, which is to replace Israel with what they call Palestine. It's a goal that is shared by all the Palestinian, what they call resistance organizations. But the point I wanted to make to you, Khaled, and I know it's something that you and I have talked about for years, is that the ability to deceive and bamboozle the West around what looks to be a democratic, liberal, reform, Western, a political pre-state authority has created a lot of damage and has really compromised the true search for some sort of political pathway for the Palestinians that might be local clan-based communities. That is how the Middle East is organized. But the problem is, and with this I'm going to toss it back to you, is that they have created a faux Western idea that the Palestinian Authority really is kind of like one of the 50 states of the United States, that they operate according to Western liberal democratic principles, which is anything but the truth.
Why are you surprised, Dan? I mean, deception has always been a major component of the Palestinian Authorities or the PLO strategy.
It's Islamic warfare.
You can call it Islamic warfare, you can call it whatever you want, but it's a major component. Don't forget, Yasser Arafat was a master in deception. He was a man who spoke in 2 voices, one to the West and one to the Palestinians. And when I personally tried to point this out to Westerners back then in the early 90s, after the signing of the Oslo Accords, they did not want to listen. They said, we only listen to what Yasser Arafat tells us in English. That's much more important. In Arabic, Arafat's message was very bad. It was very negative. It was actually undermining the peace process that he himself claimed to support. And in the end, we saw the result. The result was an intifada, violence, bloodshed, a radicalized Palestinian society as a result of incitement in the media, as a result of incitement by Yasser Arafat himself and the Palestinian leaders. Yasser Arafat was excellent when it came to sending, conflicting messages. And Mahmoud Abbas is not different. But I say something like this: why do we blame Palestinian leaders? They're very good in this. It's something that they excel in doing. Why don't we shift the blame to those who allow themselves repeatedly to be
willfully
duped?
blind.
Yeah, to be duped.
Yeah.
And to pretend, to play along with this game. If the international community really wanted to see real changes in the Palestinian leadership, in the Palestinian Authority, they know how to get it from the Palestinian leaders. You go there, you bang on the table, you demand it. But it's not enough to say, okay, he promised me. Oh, he said he will do something. Mahmoud Abbas said he will cut off the payments to the families of the Palestinian prisoners. Later, he announced in Arabic that the prisoners and their families and the martyrs, quote unquote, will continue to receive the payments. Again, this is another example of conflicting messages, of double talk. And the international community appears to be, fine with it. They play along with it. They call him a reformist. Mahmoud Abbas is not really interested in sharing powers with anyone. He's not really interested at the age of 89, after 20 years of being in office and bringing about any real change. He's not going, even if he appoints a vice president to the Palestinian Authority or a deputy to the head of the PLO, which he himself is the chairman of, don't expect any real change. Don't expect the vice president or the deputy chairman of the PLO to challenge Abu Mazen or to adopt a different policy. These are the same people then.
And they're the same people. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to put a moment of context on your point. When we look at the international or the free world right now, I call it the Palestinian pager strategy, which is based on Israel's success in the beeper bombs in the Middle East. What the Palestinians have done for decades, which is summarized in your eloquent attestation of what is happening now in the PLO Central Council and the deception, is that they have signaled the world that Israel should be erased, Israel should be canceled, Israel is a war criminal, Israel is a genocidal actor, and you see how that double messaging by Arafat, beginning in the late 1960s, when he took over as PLO chairman in 1969, February to be exact, he then landed and essentially kidnapped the discourse in the UN itself, continued through the Durban Conference, all the way through today. Hamas leveraged those messages of disinformation and deception, and you now have the institutionalization of Yasser Arafat's legacy, which is the total cancellation of Israel as a legitimate sovereign entity representing not only as the nation state of the Jewish people, but as the nation state of Jews, Muslims, and Christians in this only free democratic country in the Middle East. So they have succeeded in their pager strategy, if you will, in the international battlefield. And I think the West must understand this, why Israel and others, friends in the United States, who say the PA is no different than the Hamas ideationally in terms of what they want in the end, which is why we have to move in a different direction for Palestinian leadership.
Well, certainly the PA's rhetoric is not much different than Hamas's rhetoric. And I follow the PA's rhetoric. They're using the same terminology, by the way, as Hamas. Sometimes if you cover your eyes, you will not be able to distinguish between a Hamas official and a PA official on TV, because the language is very similar.
Like the Pepsi challenge.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very important point. But going back, Dan, I like to simplify things for our viewers so that they will understand what are we talking about. And I've been saying this for quite a while now. Palestinian leaders have radicalized their people against Israel to a point where no Palestinian leader can make any concessions or peace with Israel, period. And because of this radicalization of Palestinian society, ironically, most of it happened after the beginning of the peace process, after the signing of the Oslo Accords. Because of this incitement against Israel, you look at Palestinian society today, and you see that there's a majority there that has not come to terms with Israel's right to exist. They look at Israel and see Israel as one big settlement that needs to be uprooted. And that's basically what we're talking about. And for many Palestinians, because of this massive campaign of incitement in the mosques, in the media, in the rhetoric, by Palestinian leaders, whether it's the PLO, Hamas, it doesn't really matter. Because of that, many Palestinians have been radicalized to a point where they look at Israel and see Israel as a Zionist enemy, as a Zionist entity. They do not recognize Israel's right to exist, and that's a very basic problem. And the question now is, how do we fix this? It will take generations, because you need to embark on a process of de-radicalization, and that requires brave leaders. And I don't see any leader in Ramallah, certainly not in Gaza, who can stand up and say, folks, we need to embark on a new approach. We need to we need to stop poisoning the hearts and minds of our young people. It's not about Israel as much as it's about our own society, our own children. But I don't see that. It's very difficult. It's very hard to find a pragmatic, moderate Palestinian leader who will say something like this, because he or she knows that if they speak out, they will, be, in the best case, condemned as traitors, and in the worst case, they will be shot by their own people as traitors, and that's a very serious problem.
Khaled, it seems that it has come time in the political, diplomatic, if you will, discourse regarding the Palestinians to de-escalate the public declarations and to, I would say, go quiet. Go quiet, meaning that what we saw pre-1993, when Arafat wasn't sounding off on the stages of the United Nations and affiliated agencies and throughout Europe, because Europe fell for, beginning with Bruno Kreisky in the 1970s, they fell for Arafat very quickly in these double messages, even triple messages. But now is the time to go quiet, to identify, and there are men and women in Ramallah and in the other major Palestinian-controlled cities in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, that are business people, that are commerce people, that are high-tech professionals, that are economists. And we know that the Middle East best business people, best economists come from Palestinian heritage. They are the ones that built the Gulf. They built Kuwait. They were expelled by hundreds of thousands by the Iraqis themselves, correct? Or by the Kuwaitis themselves. I'm sorry.
That was after
Saddam Hussein invaded.
Yeah, made the mistake of supporting
Qassam. Exactly. So the point being that these are among the best technocrats in the Middle East, and it's time to change strategy. And this is really a message. It's a message also to our friends in the Middle East and also our friends in the West, that the way to go here, it seems, and I'm sort of asking you at the same time as I'm proposing this, is to really identify those professionals, get off the microphones, get off the television, get off the social networks, and begin to build better economy quietly with Israel, quietly with Saudi, quietly with the Gulf, which is happening a little bit here and there, and let things be. let things quiet down. No declarations, no major peace processes. And I think that President Trump's vision for Gaza can serve as an example for what could be in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. That is not to say empty out the West Bank cities right now under PA and local control, but rather to depoliticize the public discourse.
Dan, this is great, and I love your ideas, and they sound really reasonable, and the problem is that they are unrealistic, and I'll tell you why. We are ignoring the elephant in the room. We are ignoring the fact that in the West Bank, you have a PLO regime with tens of thousands of security officers. You have a military infrastructure. You have a government. You have a political leadership. The PLO leadership. You have the Fatah leadership. You have all these armed groups in the West Bank. And as long as they are there, you're not going to see the emergence of the good guys you are talking about.
Because you're talking about mafia politics, basically, and mafia violence.
And if you speak out against President Mahmoud Abbas, or if you put a comment against him on Facebook or on social media, you go to prison. So people are, they think twice before they speak out. This is not a democracy. And the Palestinian Authority has probably 50,000 security officers, and they use many of these security forces, the multiple security forces that they have, to suppress the emergence of new leadership and to go after political opponents. And that's a big problem. So,
I mean, even before they speak out, if they speak out.
Yes, I mean, one of their main jobs in the West Bank is to make sure that, there is no opposition to Mahmoud Abbas, to the PLO, to Fatah. And that's why people are afraid to speak out. And that's a major problem. There are good people out there. There are people who care about the economy. There are people who want technology. You know what? There are even people who want to work with Israel in the West Bank. I meet them. But the people are afraid to speak out, and that's a very serious problem. So if you want to encourage the emergence of new leadership in the West Bank, you need to find a way to deal with the Palestinian Authority or the PLO or Fatah or all these groups that are operating over there. There is a regime in the West Bank. It's a mini state, and it's become part of the problem, not part of any solution.
So here we've created a monster. We've created a Frankenstein in the West Bank called the Palestinian Authority, which by the way, looks, in other words, it looks one way, it looks moderate, but it actually in essence has an extreme DNA. And that head fake, that bamboozlement is what is so confusing to the West and why it's difficult. There are those that have suggested because of the PA, Palestinian Authority's pay to slay program, which is really financing and incentivizing terror, that they be put on the State Department's list of terror sponsoring authorities. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean that's only one of the problems. What about the fact that the Palestinian Authority is a mini dictatorship? What about the fact that there is no freedom of speech in the West Bank? What about the fact that there is no free media? What about the fact that there is no functioning parliament? What about the fact that elections have not been held for the past 2 decades? President Mahmoud Abbas, who is now talking about the possibility of appointing a vice president, is about to enter the 20th year of a 4-year term in office. So, I mean, in the eyes of many Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas are not legitimate. They do not have much credibility among Palestinians. One of the reasons why Palestinians in the West Bank do not erupt against the Palestinian Authority is because the Palestinian Authority is the largest employer in the West Bank, and people are afraid. They want to receive their salaries at the end of the month. They do not want to, to get into trouble with the Palestinian Authority. There have been many cases where the Palestinian Authority cuts off your salary or suspends it if they see that you are criticizing them. So that's one of the reasons. But this will not last for long. It's only a matter of time before Palestinians in the West Bank erupt against this bad leadership, this mini dictatorship in the West Bank. I mean, as I said, no elections, no functioning parliament, who are the decision makers in the West Bank, in Ramallah? There are 3 or 4 people. They do not consult with anyone. It's Mahmoud Abbas and 3 or 4 people around him. And that is a very serious problem that the international community needs to pay attention to. But they're not paying attention to. People are more interested in a vice president than in democracy, than in freedom of speech. Can you show me one opposition newspaper in Ramallah? Can you show me an open and free debate in Ramallah and in the West Bank? They don't have that. Many Palestinians in the West Bank, some of my Palestinian colleagues, they envy me. They say, Khaled, you are lucky. You work inside Israel. You live inside Israel. You work in the Israeli media. You guys have freedom, which we don't. And I think that this is a very serious problem. The whole structure of the Palestinian Authority, the whole makeup of this, all these organizations, PLO, Fatah, the PLO Executive Committee, the Fatah Revolutionary Council, this is not what Palestinians need. Palestinians need good governance. They need accountability, transparency. These are much more important. They need someone to build an economy, and not all these political groups in Ramallah, PFLP and DFLP. This does not really help the Palestinians. It's actually taking the Palestinians back. Many people in the West Bank are afraid that in the end, they will meet the same fate as the people in Gaza.
So that is a great transition into what I call the Hamas boomerang. And the Hamas boomerang, the backfire here, is that when the 1,600,000 or 650,000 Arabs in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria watch television, whether it's Al Jazeera or whether it's CNN, and they see the destruction that Hamas has brought upon Gaza, when they watch the results of what the Hamas massacre in Israel brought upon the Gazan people, it has a quieting effect among those in the West Bank. They had thought in the beginning that it would create a competition among the what we call terrorists, militants in the cities like Jenin, like Nablus, like Tulkarm, where there are Iranian agents and there are Hamas and PIJ loyalists and affiliates with being paid by the IRGC to stir up trouble. But the vast majority of the population, I would submit, it has been, I would say, restrained because they see what the results will be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree.
So if we agree on that point, does it create an opportunity for some sort of local, quiet, technical leadership without any announcements and, just like the Hebron Chamber of Commerce? So you have sort of a business community that's creating jobs quietly under the table with Saudi, with the Gulf, with no announcements, no proclamations, no declarations, but just quiet employment and political empowerment without declarations.
Dan, the Palestinian Authority is deeply entrenched in Palestinian society. You cannot run a business in the West Bank
around them.
Yeah. I mean, they want their commission of it. It's, as you said, it's a mafia. And any expectation that, private initiatives here and there could work, there were people who tried, by the way. There were businessmen who did try to launch a private initiative here, an economic project there, and the Palestinian Authority came after them. You know what? Ask Bashar al-Masri, the
entrepreneur, the real estate entrepreneur.
The man who built the Rawabi. Yeah. The Palestinian Authority gave him a very hard time because he worked outside the framework of the Palestinian Authority. He worked independently, and he faced many challenges. And there are dozens of other businessmen who face the same challenges and threats even by the Palestinian Authority. Some of them even had to quit, sell their businesses, and leave the country because they could not put up with the mafia-style measures of the Palestinian Authority or PLO officials or Fatah officials. There are many groups operating out there. So it goes back to the regime, the Palestinian Authority regime or the PLO regime. If you want to see the emergence of new leaders, you need to undermine
Dismantle
or
the PA.
dismantle or whatever. But no one will dare stand up against them.
Well, you see what's happened with Hamas. Hamas is agreed between the United States and Israel at this point, even with quiet support from some of the Gulf states and the blessing of Saudi Arabia. Hamas has to go. It has to go as a terror power, governmental power, political power, a civil power, and you know what? It's a copy paste. At this moment, I would submit to you, it's a copy-paste of the West Bank. The PA has, it is time the PA to be dismantled and a new political leadership to emerge, not under threat, but with the encouragement of the region, because the Gulf-led establishment in the Middle East, which is increasing. I mean, there are talks about Lebanon, Lebanon normalizing, and talks about perhaps Syria joining the circle of peace. And if that is the case, is there not now a position to say it's time to dismantle the PA, stop the threats, and rebuild a bottom-up, much more local leadership, the way it looks like Gaza is going in that direction?
The only way to achieve this, Dan, is by having international Western donors, set conditions or make such drastic demands from the Palestinian Authority. And number two, you need the backing of key Arab countries, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt. And I still don't see these two things happening. I don't see pressure on the Palestinian Authority. I don't see the international Western donors really applying pressure on the Palestinian Authority to change. What we are seeing, as I said, are cosmetic changes aimed to curry favor with Western donors. The Palestinian authorities or the Palestinian leadership's strategy is to win international legitimacy and to get as much money as possible. These are this is the real strategy of Mahmoud Abbas and company sitting in Ramallah. And this is a major problem. I think that the Arab countries are making a big mistake by not really, getting more involved in the Palestinian Authority, in the Palestinian Authority's inner workings and things like that. You don't see that they are really banging on the table and demanding that Mahmoud Abbas, introduce real changes. And that's another problem. So as long as he does not feel pressure from the international community or from the Arab world, he's not going to change.
So it's interesting. We can call this brief between us, this discussion, maximum pressure on the Palestinian leadership, the maximum pressure campaign, not only on Iran, but on the Iranian regime, but on the Palestinian regime. Maximum pressure.
It's in order to help the Palestinian people, more than Israel. This is the only way. The Palestinian people are suffering from bad leadership, whether it's Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. It's time for them to elect new leaders. It's time for them to liberate themselves from these bad leaders, from these bad parties that have brought disaster, destruction, and death on them for the past several decades, not only in the past year or two. This has been going on for many years. And it all goes back to bad leadership that deprives its people of the international aid, leadership that never offers its people real hope, leadership that drags its people from one disaster to another. And when I say leadership, I'm not drawing a distinction between Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. I hold both of them equally responsible for the disasters that they have brought on the Palestinians.
Yeah, time to move from disaster to possibilities and opportunities. Khaled Abu Toameh, my friend, colleague, and a teacher for all of us, for all things Palestinian and Middle East. I'm so delighted we had this conversation, and I hope our friends across the oceans are listening as well as here in the region, because we stand at a watershed moment, whether the region is going to secure itself, stabilize itself, and become more prosperous, assuming that the Iranian threat can be dealt with properly, and that is credible military threat, and at the same time stop Palestinian subversion of an emerging Middle East that can be historically significant. Thanks so much.
We say inshallah.
We say inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So that's
God willing.
God willing, inshallah, in Yotz Hashem, they say in Hebrew, that is al-Shaq al-Asad Lana, that is the Middle East in its own image. And that's why we're here, and it's always a pleasure. And thank our and we also thank our friends from across and our audiences from across the seas for sharing in this discussion.
Thank
with
you.
us.